how's it going, everybody? Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. So, we're going to be sitting down talking about a movie called The Old Way. So, this is a Western starring Nick Cage, and before I actually talk about this movie, I just want to say that last night, I was kind of sitting down, decompressing a little bit after seeing Megan, processing it a little bit more, and I went into this film with pretty much no expectations. I went into this film thinking that it was going to be like every other shitty B, 20% Rotten Tomatoes Western that I've seen over the past few years. For example, films like Murder at Yellowstone City, which came out last year, which I was not a huge fan of. But this movie is actually pretty good. So this movie's only got like a 36% on Rotten Tomatoes. It only has a few people that have reviewed it so far. And if I'm being honest, we all know that Nick Cage has a certain reputation, at least, before this most recent lineup of pretty damn decent films, of just kind of starring in whatever he can get his, foot in. So, with that being said about, the whole Western B-movie bullshit, with Nick Cage's kind of, past efforts, also with this being a limited release, kind of. It's only been released in a few theaters, at least across my city. Also, with it being a January movie, again, I was pretty much going into this movie like, okay, well, it's a disposable 90-minute Western. Probably won't even do a review on it. Let's just do something since I have the day off. Which brings me to my last thing I want to say before I actually get started with this review, is that I don't know why Westerns don't get any notice anymore. I don't know why it seems like they're just not cared about. Like, all the ones that come out are just these films that no one expects to be good, that doesn't really seem like they want to put much marketing into it, much effort, that they don't have much hope, that they never have these huge budgets. And so that's one thing I want to say, because I've already stated, in this review, we're only like a minute or something in, that I actually like this movie. So going back to like my initial thoughts about the movie and everything, like kind of how I wasn't expecting much. So this movie opens with a guy being hung. It takes place, in a Western town, and this guy that's being hung, he's like stolen from all the townsfolk and everything, and Nick Cage is more or less kind of like the guy behind it all that's calling all the shots. He's the guy that you don't want to fuck with. He's the outlaw of this movie. He's the guy that everyone fears, that no one fucks with. It doesn't actually say this, but as the movie goes on, you find out that he is the guy that kind of calls the shots in this town. And after this guy's hung, you see that his 12-year-old son or so, around that age, actually witnessed his father's death, which had a huge, impact on him. And Nick Cage and this kid stare each other down before Nick Cage rides off into the sunset. And then after that, we're fast forwarded some odd years. Nick Cage is now a retired gunslinger. He has a 12-year-old daughter. He has a wife. He pretty much left this past, in the past. He left this whole other side of him to begin a new life with a family and everything like that. Well, while Nick Cage is walking his 12-year-old daughter to school, the young boy, who is now a full-grown adult, he shows up with, some lackeys of his. They brutally murder Nick Cage's wife, which forces Nick Cage to dig up his old roots and go back to, well, the old way, in which is essentially a revenge Western film where Nick Cage is now after these guys who killed the leader's father when he was a little boy, who now killed Nick Cage's wife as revenge, which now Nick Cage is going to go after them for one final showdown. Now, what I'm going to say is that this film is a lot better in a lot of areas than I was expecting. Both writing, directing, as well as, the more main stars. I thought the main villain was really well casted, as well as the young daughter, which, like I said in my past review of Megan, I'm not a big fan of child performers or child actors. I don't think really anybody is. But like Megan, which is a vastly different film, obviously, I actually was a really big fan of the young star, and like this movie, she actually holds the movie. Which there are a lot of characters in this film, but there's, three main ones: Nick Cage, his daughter, and then the main villain. And I think that they're all, very well casted again in this movie. There's also supporting characters that are, pretty decent as well. Most notably, for example, Shiloh Hernandez, which was the main character of the most recent Evil Dead film. I guess if I did have one expectation, it was that, like, kind of what I was expecting based off of what I saw, the little bit that I did, the little bit that I read on. It's like Joe with Nicolas Cage meets In a Valley of Violence, but also meets True Grit. The Joe setting in the case of like the demeanor that Nick Cage plays in this film, it did heavily remind me of his role in Joe. Also, yes, he's got this little, 12-year-old sidekick with him, which is a lot like, True Grit, for example. Also with the layers of revenge in this movie, which, kind of like in A Valley of Violence, there's a lot of revenge layers in that movie. You can definitely see that with this film. The director and or writer, I don't know if they're, the same person, I didn't look up too much with this movie. You can tell that they're definitely trying to stick to the classic Western feel and that they definitely had a lot of experience with Western films. But also what I want to mention is that this is kind of a different of a Western film in a lot of ways, where it's definitely more risky and that the director and or writer definitely had a say in how much that they actually wanted to do with it. This definitely feels like something where they had a lot of say in it, which I think is very good. The biggest issue is, again, like I said earlier, a lot of Westerns these days don't really have a lot of marketing, a whole lot of faith, a whole lot of, production value. But going into what I was saying about how this Western feels a lot different and everything, is it just feels like, again, it had a lot more freedom. It's a lot more funner. Also the tones, especially. For a lot of the movie, not only are we actually focusing on, Nick Cage and this little girl as a father and daughter, but even just them as individual people, even before shit goes down, we actually just see like an ordinary life of these people, where we're not just seeing Nick Cage's new life, aside from his, very violent past one, but we're also seeing, what that consists of, again, as far as, these individual family members. Also, another thing that I want to know, and this is just me specifically, is that there was a lot of suspense and a lot of humor that I was not expecting to be, to a certain level, as well as the film being a lot stronger and a lot darker than I was expecting. Again, this just feels like such a different kind of Western film. It seems like there was a lot of freedom in a lot of different areas, that they tried pretty much all kinds of different things, without really abusing them, that they thought, could, again, make this your classic Western tale, but also making it as an original project as it could be with the circumstances. And again, they try a lot of things in this movie, and not all of them work. Most notably, the dramatic tones. There's a lot of times where they do kind of overstay their welcome. They kind of bite off more than they can chew, and sometimes it goes, again, a little bit stretched on. And a lot of this movie, before you're actually seeing the, revenge kind of outlook on it, you are seeing the bond between Nick Cage and his daughter. Again, not just them as a family, but Nick Cage trying to adapt to this new life. Also, that effect that it has on his daughter, how he was born and who he actually is, on the inside, regardless of everything. What kind of a person that is, crafting his daughter into. This film also has a lot of cliches in it. Again, it tries a lot of things, and it's not, again, it's like about as original, again, as it could be. But the difference is that you could tell that the movie's having fun with that. It probably knows that. And again, with the circumstances, with this low-budget Western movie coming out in a time like 2022, the maker behind this film definitely having, a love and experience of Western films, you kind of get that outcome of this overall movie. And again, going back to the cliches, while I thought the main villain was cast well, as well as one of his lackeys, which is, again, Shiloh Hernandez from the Evil Dead movie, his lackeys are just the most stereotypical, most cliche, doofy, fucking, just idiotic, slapstick, fucking, just your basic doofy ass lackeys. But again, regardless of all the cliches and how much that they were actually putting into this movie as far as, faith and production, budget, whatever, and, marketing and all that, I do think it was more or less as fun and also as original as it really could have been. Again, there's some layers of suspense, humor. It's well casted. There's a lot of good, one-liners that I thought were extremely, again, strong and dark and heavy for this kind of film that will definitely stick with me after this movie. And my overall, I guess, review of this is that it's not great, but it is better than a lot of not only, low-budget Westerns, but Westerns of recent memory in general. I just think that this is one that was much better than expected, and it definitely deserves better in general. I also forgot to mention the ending, this is a very common thing in movies. The ending is the weakest part of the movie. It feels a lot shallower than it could have been, especially with how much better and how much more involved the movie was actually as far as, expectations went. But the ending still does offer, some things to look back on, and I think that, again, with the rest of the movie, with this, more hit or miss ending, is still wrapped up into an overall pretty decent movie. So yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of The Old Way. So I said a lot of times that my favorite genre besides, horror, the one after that, is probably Western. And I try not to miss Westerns. I even saw, Blackwoods, I think it was called that came out last year. I had like 6 fucking reviews. Again, I also saw Murder at Yellowstone City, which wasn't a big success either. But again, because of movies like that, I went in this one kind of expecting, it to just be something that was just kind of a throwaway. And a lot of critics are kind of seeing it that way. Not as bad as Backwoods or Murder at Yellowstone City, but of that kind of nature. And I gotta say, as someone who is very fond of Westerns and, likes a lot of Western movies, has a good, outlook and experience of them, I do think that this one deserves, again, a lot better. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of the Old Way. Let me know if you guys get a chance to see this, what you guys thought about it, as well as what your guys' favorite Westerns are down below. But yes, guys, with all that being said, let me know what you thought about the review as well down below, and I will be seeing you guys in the next video very soon. I hope you guys are having a great day, and thank you guys so much for watching. Take care.